Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields.
I'm Dave Guzman.
And welcome to Practical Bass, where every week we pick a new topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we discuss it and hopefully give you some tips, some advice, some insight, and maybe prompt some questions for you, which you are welcome to direct back to us. We would love to hear from you, our listeners. We really want to have a relationship with you, and you can reach us on our website, which is practicalbass.com. But you can also reach us many other places: Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Google+. You can find this podcast on Stitcher Radio on any platform, or you can use your podcasts app on your iOS device, or you can use your iTunes application on your macOS. On Android devices, you can find us on the Google Play Music Store. Just go to podcasts on any of these platforms and look for Practical Bass, and there you will find us with bells on. So, Dave, what are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about what is your role at a gig as a bass player.
As a bass player, I just show up and play my instrument, right?
That's right. That's not right. That's
not
wrong.
Oh, you meant like it's not 100% right in the sense that it's 100% wrong.
Exactly.
Okay,
that's exactly what I was going for.
This is the spot I usually end up in. 100% wrong.
So I think this topic, it's a pretty broad area, but really it's about who, for me, is what is your role? Who are you? Not just as a bass player, right? Because there's different areas of this as far as like what do you bring musically to the table, but also as someone who's contributing to the band. Like what is your personality, or what are you bringing to the gig or to your band, or as a teammate, as a band member, and really think about what strengths do you have? What are you bringing to the table? Are you the reliable band member? Are you the fixer, like the wolf who just comes in and don't worry about it, he's on it? Are you just the extreme artist? Like, are you the one that's just completely like maybe not necessarily reliable, but what you bring to the table is your artistry, right?
Yeah.
And there's no better or worse. It's just kind of understanding.
Like I play in colors.
Right. Right. And are you an administrator? Are you really good? Are you good at motivating the band? There's so many different pieces of this. There are no better or worse roles. Like I think, the importance really is just understanding what you bring to the table, and maybe consider some roles that you can take on to build your value.
Yeah. So if I hear you, what you're saying is, we're not here basically telling people this is the role that you need to be in. It's more about like understanding yourself and what you can bring to the band other than just showing up and playing your instrument. Exactly.
So, Paul, I think I could take like a wild guess at all the hats that you wear.
I have the hat with the two beer things on it.
That's the hat. It's one hat fits all.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Tell me, what do you like? What are the roles that you hold?
Well, so there's the role that I have like as a player, right? And I think maybe a lot of people see bass playing similarly, where you're there to kind of tie the rhythm section together, glue things from the percussion upward into the melody. You define the chord, right? I always loved the quote that Sting had, whatever he says, like, oh, it's not an A minor until it's not an A minor chord until I play an A. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the groove, right? You're there to kind of lock in with the drummer and play a groove, and always be thinking about making room for whatever instrument is important, whether it's like a guitar solo or the vocals or a saxophone, whatever the case is, like defining the space in which they can operate and hopefully like launch,
right?
Like you're their launch pad.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's just playing, right? On top of that, for one of my bands, I'm the manager, the booking guy, sometimes the musical director, trying to drive, like, not necessarily like dictate how things are going to go, but drive a consensus on how we're going to do something and make sure that it's decided and that everybody's on the same page for what that is. Like, we're going to do, we're going to take this after this, chorus 3, we're going to go back to the head.
Yep.
Right. Make those decisions and make sure everybody knows what they are.
Like a musical director.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
So, but let me just ask you a question then. When you say like a band manager, do you like, is that a conversation that you have with your bandmates, like, who wants to be the manager, or do you just sort of flow into that role?
Well, for me, it was sort of, I think I kind of flowed into it,
Right.
but honestly, it was just, I had some resources and some planning skills and organizational skills that I brought to the table.
Yep.
And no one else seemed really eager to do it. And
Yep.
I was like, well, it needs to get done. Right.
Right.
So kind of jumped in and did it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's like, there's like, getting a website together and, trying to make sure that like calendars are posted when they need to be and things like that. And,
Right.
I have my background from my day job is, I'm a manager and I'm kind of a technical guy. So it's kind of a good fit. Right.
Yep.
But always the thing I got to keep in mind is, bandmates aren't your employees necessarily. Like
That's the difference, right?
Yeah. There are situations where like you may be paying somebody to come in and do a gig, right? Like, and that may be very much like an employee situation.
Sure.
And I try and think about that as a guy who sits in with people that, I'm kind of an employee then. And,
Right.
I'm not there to tell other people how it is. I'm there to be told and do my best to fit in exactly where they want me to.
Right. Right.
But, that's a difference. Like when you're managing at work, people are looking to you to rate their performance. And when you're doing things in a band situation, you're all there because you want to be. No one should, like, at a certain level of band,
Yeah.
no one's really there to have their performance rated or anything like that.
Right.
Whereas there are levels of band that you get to, when you're playing like a much larger show that travels,
Yeah.
and, you have a musical director, you very much are in the mode of, you're there to do your part according to exactly what the MD wants,
Yep.
deliver that day in and day out. And because they are going to rate your performance, they're not going to necessarily give you like, a performance rating, like on a
Yeah.
form, but those are the people who are going to spread your reputation to other
Yeah.
people and get you calls. So, you want them to have a good opinion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my series of hats that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to agree with you. Like for me, from a musical standpoint, it's the same thing. And I think it's pretty common for bassists to, I feel like I'm the liaison between basically the percussive side of the house and the melodic side. But also with that, I think when I approach the bass musically, I approach it with a level of diplomacy. Like, because I'm this liaison, I almost take on this role where I'm like arbitrating or like managing both sides of the house of that stage. And I take that same balance and that same approach into my personality within the band. So, I use like basically the same set of rules as a band member. So that would be like for me, reliability, right? The administrative, the managing the efficiencies of our practice, managing the efficiencies of load in, load out.
Being the guy who shows, like, you're the guy who shows up on time and just,
Right.
If no one else has, you kind of grease the wheels for moving in and that sort of thing.
Leading by example, or
Yeah.
all of those pieces. And I always have like in my mind the plan B, like the preparedness of what if this goes sideways? Where can I help? What's our plan? The second thing I keep in mind is communication. So, for me, that's around like reminders to bandmates, recaps of maybe whatever happened in a rehearsal.
Right.
Kind of tying that all together.
Right.
Hey, this is what we did. These are the recordings that I got. These, whatever that looks like. But also planning, marketing, all of those pieces kind of roll into communication for me. I also feel like as a bassist, I'm a motivator. Like I feel like as a bass player, when I'm on stage, I can charge things. Like it's not all up to the drummer, not all up to the singer. Like I can move a song in a way that like kind of just pushes, little, a foot on the gas a bit. And I can do that also as a bandmate, right? So
Yeah.
that's around, booking gigs, creating times for discussions. Like I'll email my bandmates like, hey, let's all meet up for coffee or for a beer and let's talk about this because this is something
Right.
we need to approach, right?
Right.
And those are motivating times because as a band, we're gluing a little bit tighter and saying, we can do this
Right.
kind of attitude.
It's more than just like showing up to play the gig and then splitting up and then you go your separate ways. Right.
Right.
If you're aiming for something more than that,
Yes.
you have to have that glue time.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's a team.
Right. And then the last piece for me is, to be a helper. Like, I'm not there just to like go in, load out, and then say goodbye. It's like I help my bandmates load in and load
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
Physically, I just give them a hand. I carpool whenever I can. I give my bandmates feedback. Like I create a place where I can give them feedback, and I want to like create an openness where I can take feedback and let them know that it's okay. Like it's okay to tell me that my bass is weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just creating that environment, that helps, in essence, just helps the band in general.
Yeah.
Music, I feel, can put musicians in a very vulnerable space, right? Like
Right.
our ego gets in there
Yeah.
because this is our like soul coming out in in 4 strings or 6 strings or a drum, whatever.
Right.
And to be able to come at that, just to remember that that's there is so important for me when
Yeah.
I'm communicating with my bandmates.
Right. And you're already kind of like exposing yourself in front of a lot of people. And then
Right.
you're thinking about like if you have a discussion or something,
Right.
you're thinking about, hey, I'm having this discussion. What does this discussion look like to other people who are watching it?
Yeah.
There are all of those dynamics that kind of come into play
Yeah.
at the same time.
Exactly. And so, and with that all being said, and the reality is that I'm like in my head, I feel like I do a really good job, but I make mistakes. Like there are flaws.
You're human, Dave?
Sometimes,
Inhumanly groovy.
sometimes I make mistakes, and I, and that's okay. And I think we have to realize like where are those mistakes? Are they repeat, or are they just one offs where we drop the ball or whatever, or are they like common pitfalls? So I don't know. Like, do you have things in your like base life where you feel are like repeat behaviors or things that just happen that don't make you the best like teammate, bandmate, bass player, etc.?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, I remember this happened actually pretty recently, within the last year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've made mistakes other than that. It's not like 2 years ago was the last mistake I made. Dave.
Once I made a mistake.
Once I made a mistake. Once.
Just
No, this one just really sticks out of my head as being like egregious. Like I'm gonna be thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's gonna come up in other stories, I think, for the rest of my life. But
yeah.
there was an occasion where, I was in kind of a little bit of a battle of wills with a guy that we brought in to the band. Like we had a pretty good unit,
Yeah.
and we were looking to fill it out with a few guys. And this guy was one of the folks we brought in. I'm gonna leave, the role, the
Yeah.
names, everything out of this to protect the
Wait,
guilty.
was it me?
It was not you, Dave.
The second bassist?
The second, we were going morphine.
Right. I was going for the low, and you wanted me to go for the high-low.
High-low, yeah. And then it
We just
wasn't
clashed.
working. I'm sorry, Dave, it wasn't working. Let's just leave it at that. No, but it was clear that this guy, he came in with an agenda, and he hadn't really made that clear to any of us. Like he really like hid it up his sleeve.
Yep.
I mean, it was very clear in retrospect what was going on, that he was like trying to come in and basically turn the group into what he wanted,
Yep.
which was not at all the vision that we had. Like we were very clear on what we wanted to do.
Right.
And so,
Because that's a shortcut. Like it takes
Yeah.
a lot. If you have an idea of a project that you want, you have to go out and find the people and
Right.
get them get them pumped about your idea, but to sort of sneak in with like someone else's agenda and then just say, yeah, I could do that. And then,
and now I've got all these guys to do it.
great, I got the talent.
Yeah.
The talent is here.
Right, exactly. No, it's absolutely the case. But be that as it may, right? This is not about him. This is about something that I did wrong,
Right.
which is rather than settle that issue privately and say, okay, well, let's take that out. Like what I would do in my job now is if I'm having a disagreement with somebody and it's in the middle of a group meeting,
Yep.
I'm not going to hash it out there. I'm going to say, hey, let's,
Right.
there's clearly, I think there's maybe some misunderstanding here, but let's clear that offline. We'll using
Table
the
it.
work speak, right?
Yep.
We'll deal with that elsewhere.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah. And let's, and for now, let's just keep things moving here. There's no reason to like bring the whole meeting down or whatever.
That's right.
But rather than do that, right, a skill which I know well from work and I probably should have put to work here, instead, I I kind of like, got riled up and, I wanted to hash it out then during rehearsal, and it wasn't, it didn't turn into a shouting match, but it was very tense. It was
Right.
clearly very tense.
Yeah.
And it turned the whole rehearsal upside down.
Yeah.
It just like kind of polluted the water, and it really could have gone better. And if I'd applied these lessons from what I know elsewhere, I would have waited till after all the work was done and just kind of, held it within myself,
Yeah.
been patient, and then talked about it later after my, temperature had cooled down.
That's right.
And and so I didn't do that. And
Yeah.
that was definitely a space where my role as a leader in this group, I did not like execute on that. I didn't do what really needed to be done. I didn't show good leadership there.
Right. And we're human, right? Like I have, one of my personal projects is always in rehearsal, right? We're always writing, we're always in the studio, and I take on a lot of the managerial stuff, and my bandmates know it. And they're not just bandmates; they're like besties,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm the one that like holds a lot of it together. And recently I had a situation where I felt like there were a lot of issues, and I was holding them in, like I was keeping that managerial piece, and I exploded. Like I literally was a poop show.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we can curse on the podcast.
I actually have learned how to beep on here. Yeah, I've learned how to bleep.
Okay.
So
I was a show.
Yeah.
And I like hands up in the air, calling everybody out, like laying everything on the car. But it was like, that was a place where I did think about it before I did it. Like I didn't completely untie myself from that managerial role.
you didn't get unhinged.
It was like, yeah. And it was like that point where like, it just needed to be said, the things. And the way that it came out, maybe from an outsider would have looked a little crazy and maybe a little unprofessional. But we're in a place where I can do that. Like that's just, if the setting is okay, like you can be that person, but
right.
in most cases you can't. Like you have to, think about, you got to cool down before you approach it.
Oh, absolutely. The idea that you can go in and just sort of, unleash hell on people and not have them think about that later. Like in the moment, sometimes you think, I just need to let this tension out. But sometimes you can clean that up. Like that Superfund site that you created. Like sometimes you can go clean that up later, and sometimes it's not as easy. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I look at, my behaviors, and I take this subject like very serious for me. Like I really try to think about how I approach it. And there have been mistakes. Like, on a previous episode, I talked about a time where I overslept. Mm-hmm. That was a huge thing. I've never overslept since then. Yeah. Which is kind of a good rule. Just don't sleep through your gig. Wake up, pack up, go show up.
Right.
But there are, I think one of the things that I look at is, from my personality, sometimes I'm too much. Like it's like I'm over prepared, or I over communicate. And I have to think about that sometimes and maybe dial it back a little bit, because I think for some musicians, like if they're super, like especially on like the artist side, like they're really, I can just come off as too much. Like, oh man, that guy's nuts.
And those two things don't always go together, right? Like I find that there's a lot of creative people that are really not good at planning. They're not good at being prepared. They really live in the moment. And that's where their creativity comes from. And you can't squash them into that mold. Like as much as you might want them to show up and be ready and have all their gear in order and everything works and they're there on time and they're helping out or they're whatever, they're like down with whatever your little scheme is in your head of what's going to happen. Like as much as you want that to happen, it's not, right? People are different. And
you can compress the instrument, but you can't compress the musician.
Very good point. That's a very good point. I love that. That's a call forward to one of our future episodes. Very well done. That's like a flash forward.
And I thought of that right just now. It wasn't even a note.
We're using cinematic tricks right here on the podcast as we speak.
The other thing that I find for me is I have triggers. Like I have things that people will do or behaviors that people will bring to the table that will set me off in a way that is not good. And I have to think about what those things are. So when someone does say something or do something that I know is like within their personality set, like that when I hear those things, instead of reacting emotionally, especially when it's on stage or like, in a performance situation, I just let it, I think about it, but I just table it and I just let it go. I don't even process it.
Yeah.
Because if I do.
You think about it and suddenly now again, you're like, we always talk about being like out of the space, like it takes you out of the space.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I guess once again, we're talking about some roles and some personality traits or skills or capabilities or even constraints, right? That we bring into musical process. And I don't think we're saying that any of these, like our audience, might or might not be in any of those roles. Like they might be completely different, right? This is just, two individual bass players talking about how we sort of bring our experience or our how we craft our role in the band. And I think the idea is that, we have realized these various things about ourselves. And as a result, we're just trying to make the best use of those things and bring them to the band, right? Like, so if I'm a super fly by night kind of, again, kind of live in the moment, really ultra creative person, then it's not that I can't be successful as a bass player. I could be hugely successful.
That's right.
The idea is to find the group and find the situation where I can capitalize on that. Like, for example, partnered up in a group where there is somebody else who takes a clear role as the person who kind of gets everything together and does the planning and does the preparation, right?
Yeah.
And then my role is just to come in, if I'm super creative and not good at that stuff, is just to come in like, with just a creative mood, like come in with a really good mood and maybe just kind of help out in general.
Yeah.
So even though I wasn't good at planning, right, show up ready to pitch in and do my best on stage.
Yeah, because it's okay. Like, I love having people in my band that are just like the fire. They come in and you're like, this is why I love music, right? Because I'm playing with this. But like, they may or may not have remembered their guitar or microphone or keyboard or whatever it is, right? Like, and that's okay. Like, but I think if you are that person, it's not better or worse, but at least communicate this. Like, just be open in your dialogue with your bandmates. Like, hey, just so you know, I may or may not come with a microphone, so you might want to bring one.
Right.
Like, just in case. Like, it's just how my brain is wired. It's okay. Like, just talk about it, put it out there. And if there are things that you can improve, you improve on it.
Right, exactly.
Are there any like tricks that you have, like tools or things that you put in to keep your role?
Well, so, the sticking with those abilities or those proclivities that I have and the way I approach being a bassist or being a musician, one of them is I try and do my homework at home. So I try and know my part, right? And if I show up to a rehearsal, typically, 2 times out of 3, depending on who I'm playing with, 2 times out of 3,
Yeah.
there are people who don't know their part, right?
Right.
And the bigger the band gets, the easier that is to happen. And it happens, right?
Yeah.
Life happens. People have things that are going on. You don't always have the time that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah.
You know, you got kind of lost in your schedule, and then the day of, you realize, oh God, I have a rehearsal tonight,
Yeah.
and I don't really know the songs or whatever.
Right.
So I try and be the guy who knows the part and can lead other people through it and go, okay, here's the chords. It goes from here to here to here
Yeah.
or whatnot. And I find as a bass player, it's a great place where I can contribute, because if the bass is wrong, or if it's, it's kind of in and out, or it's missing, or you're kind of like on the edge, it's much harder for everybody else to kind of know where they're supposed to be and to recover. So if someone else gets something wrong, if the only thing I'm doing is listening for the guitar to be right in order to fit in, it's not so good. I mean, at least it's not good for me, to fulfill my part.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like in the practice, like when that bass is off, you're just like on this like pirate ship that's like in the middle of a storm, like, just rocking all over the place, and no one knows if they're going to live or die through the song. Yar. You're a bassist, or are you a pirate?
You'll be walking the plank. That's for sure. Arr. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if all bass players are really like, more inclined to organize and think ahead, like I've been talking about. But honestly, more often than not, the bass players I meet are in this role. So I'm guessing that out of our audience, I'm going to guess more than half are going to be more like what we're describing.
Right.
That's just been my experience.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying all bassists are like that or need to be. I'm just saying, like, it seems to be more often than not the kind of people who gravitate to playing bass and making that a really serious role for themselves have that, like, they have that tendency.
The practicality.
Yeah. So it's really about, using it to your advantage, and, try and help bandmates plan ahead, and not feel bad if they missed something or didn't prepare, right? Just, have their back. You said that earlier.
Yeah.
And finally, and this is more about the playing, right? Because when you are thinking about other people, and when you're thinking about the overall organization of the song, the arrangement of the song, the thing that you have to think about just as much as notes, when you're thinking about groove and you're thinking about your part as a bass player, is space. You got to think about space as much as the notes. So, for example, like something that I learned really early in playing bass, not early enough, but thankfully it was many years ago, enough that I've gotten better at it. Just try and leave space for other important things to happen in the groove, like even within a measure. And like the immediate thing that I know I can hop into, like if it's an open mic situation or whatever, I'm subbing for folks who have, maybe a player who's kind of a younger player or less experienced or whatever. Like there's a game that I play, which is, when I come in, stick with the kick, right? Which is important, but just as important, what I'll do is I will stop my notes when the snare hits, right? If you can do this as like a little game, and almost guaranteed, if that's not something that you are familiar with or you hear already when you're thinking about your part, try it when you're locking in with a drummer and just trying to do, a simple groove. When you do that, the whole band immediately sounds better, because it creates a dynamic contrast inside of the bar. And it's very simple. I know there's probably a bunch of people listening who are like, well, duh, of course you do that. But there's a lot of people who don't know that instinctively. And if you try and develop that, like listening for that space and leaving that space, it'll get you starting to think about other spaces that you can leave. You kind of build on that. So
there's
a nice place to start.
I think for me, there's a lot of like naivety, like when I approach the bass, and I think that's something that I feel like instinctually it happens.
Yeah.
But now I'm curious, like that just sort of planted this thing in my head. So, tonight, if, at my gig, I'm going to think about that.
Yeah. Just there's like a simple
just to see, like, do I do that normally, or I like that. That's cool. All right.
So what about you? I mean, do you have some tools that you use? Are there some ways that you put your tendencies to work as a player?
Yeah, I'm an overthinker, so I'll try not to like be too wordy about this, but I keep there like administrative things that we've talked about in earlier episodes, but I keep lists. I check my calendar regularly. I keep a calendar and I keep a band calendar, right? So I'm also I feel like I help because if there's a gig or if someone says, "Hey, I booked a gig for this date, can we all do it?"
Yeah.
I know everybody's schedule.
Yeah.
Like I'm in their business in a way that's like, "Oh no, like, Joe's going to be in the Bahamas that week."
Right. You're really tracking it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to like, so it just relieves a little bit of pressure, or people feel like there's a second set of eyes on the calendar.
Right.
I also, as far as like in the band setting, I offer, as I mentioned before, like I offer feedback, but I do it, it's like for better or like, constructive stuff, but also like, hey, that thing that you just did was like killer.
Yeah.
That made us sound amazing. Like, remember that because that was really cool.
Yeah.
People like getting compliments, and I don't just dish them out just to like boost someone's ego, but like rightfully so. If you do something cool, and we do cool stuff every now and then on stage, like let someone know like, hey, you look like really sexy over there.
Yeah.
And I think that, that helps the morale. And the other piece is being mindful of your strengths and weaknesses, right? But also being mindful of your bandmates' strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So that you can help sort of capitalize on those pieces or understand like this person is going to be this way and that's okay. Right. We're just going to work around it.
Like don't put them in a position to fail, set them up to succeed.
Right. If you have a bandmate who let's say their day job is a salesperson, like get them into booking, right? Like use that. And maybe they never thought of that. Like, oh, try it out, And I think, the last piece for me is just to, make time to, if it is truly like a band, make time to be friends with your bandmates. Like create, for me, I feel like I like to organize the time to get to know each other or to deepen those relationships. Right. That's not always about music.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. Like at that mid level where, you're out of the garage and you're working and you guys are, you're together with folks for a long time. You want to create those relationships, right? You're not quite at the point where you're on tour and you have to have that relationship because there is no choice.
Right.
You're with each other all the time.
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to get to a level where you have that cohesion.
Yeah. Because we only have so much time in the day, so much time in our life. And if you are doing this thing that takes away from your schedule, like make the best of it, Right. Make it enjoyable. If you're going to your gigs and every gig, you're not getting paid a lot of money, but it's just a bad like mood situation. Why are you doing it?
Right. Right. Exactly.
So I don't know. I guess I was a little opinion heavy, but
no. I think that's great. That having opinions like this, I think this is a great area for the practicals of being a player to come out, right? It's not all about gear. Sometimes it's about skills, right? And it's about your talents and your abilities and, making sure that you're capitalizing on all of those, not just, the ability to play your instrument.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, I think at the end of it is like, I got some really good feedback years ago from a drummer. I was overplaying. It's the first time we were gigging. He was like, "Hey, you're a good drummer. You're a good bass player." I was like, "Thanks." And he said, "But you got to play less, man. Play for the song." And then he walks away. Like he dropped the bomb.
Mic drop.
I was like, and it hit me hard.
Yeah.
But the same thing, like I use those philosophies now. Like, am I playing bass? Am I playing for the song? Am I writing for the song? Am I being a bandmate for the band?
Right.
Am I doing it for the better of the project, of the music, of the band, of the performance?
Right. Are you filling that role?
Right.
Yeah. Well, what a great place to wind up. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this little conversation. We really would love to hear from you about how you use your particular abilities, your strengths. Even talk about some of the weaknesses that you would like to work on, or weaknesses that you've worked with other bandmates to kind of shore up, so that you use their strengths to the advantage of the group, let us know. Come by our website at practicalbase.com. You can talk to us on Facebook or on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Google+. And we have a new episode of Practical Base every week. It's issued on iTunes, on the Podcasts app on your iPhone, on Android. We are on Google Play Music, and you can find us on Stitcher Radio, which is available for every platform. If you don't know how to use these, simply drop by our website, practicalbase.com, and look at our subscribe link, and we will show you how you can find us through our links there. Dave and I will be back next week with another practical topic for you, the working bassist. And until then, we hope that your gigs and gear keep going fantastically well. Until then, I'm Paul Frields.
I'm Dave Guzman.
And this has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening.
Normally, if you're going to record something, you want to actually hit record.
The red button.
That's something I've learned now that we're on episode 11.
I've finally figured out.
I've learned that the red button means record.
Yeah.
We've all learned something.
It would be great to get a text from you like, "Hey Dave, I just figured out if I hit record, we're actually recording these podcasts." Do you mind if we start back over?
Right.
I had some technical difficulties I'm gonna have to redo.
Episode 0. Hello world.
Back to 0. Oh, hello world. Hello again.
Oh my God.